In this section, we will talk about the posterior compartment of the forearm. Something to note here, at the start we talked about how the forearm is divided into 3 compartments. The lateral compartment of the forearm may be regarded as part of the posterior compartments. So here we will also go through the muscle's lateral compartments in this section. The lateral compartment of the forearm only has 2 muscles, brachioradialis and extensor carpi radialis longus. The brachioradialis originates from the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus and is inserted into the base of the styloid process of the radius. This muscle flexes the forearm at the elbow joint and assists in the rotation of the forearm to mid-prone position. The second muscle is the extensor carpi radialis longus. It originates from the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus and is inserted into the base of the second metacarpal bone. Its tendon passes under the extensor retinaculum. This muscle extends and abducts the hand at the wrist joint. Both these muscles are supplied by the radial nerve. Just like how there is the flexor retinaculum in the anterior compartment, the posterior compartment has the extensor retinaculum. Moving on to the posterior compartment of the forearm. The muscle here is divided into superficial and deep groups, just like the anterior compartment of the forearm. Let us look at the superficial group of muscles. The superficial group of muscles consists of extensor carpi radialis brevis, extensor digitorum, extensor digiti minimi, extensor carpi ulnaris, and anconeus, which is also considered to be a muscle of the posterior compartment of the arm. As you can see, these muscles are closely packed. Let's go through the origin insertion of these muscles one by one, starting with the extensor carpi radialis brevis. Whoa, that's a long name, right? But do not worry, anatomists didn't name it like this just to spite medical students. But in fact, the name of the muscle shows where it is located. Let me explain it with an example. The meaning of the word extensor in the name of the muscle is obvious, and its action is that it works as an extensor. The word carpi is derived from the bones named carpals, that is, the bones of the hand's palm. Radialis is indicative of the word radial or radius, meaning that the muscle is present on the side of the radial bone. As for the word brevis, it is a Latin word that stands for short. So the extensor carpi radialis brevis is a short muscle that originates from the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. Its fibers are then inserted into the base of the third metacarpal bone by passing under the extensor retinaculum. It is innervated by the deep branch of the radial nerve, which stimulates the muscles to extend and abduct the hand at the wrist joint. Next is the extensor digitorum. This muscle originates from the common extensor tendon attached at the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. The muscle divides into 4 tendons, which pass under the extensor retinaculum and then fan out over the dorsum of the hand. On the posterior surface of each finger, the extensor tendon widens out to form the extensor expansion. The structure of the hand and the insertion of different tendons will be discussed in detail in our upcoming video on the upper limb, wrist, and hand. It is inserted into the dorsal extensor expansion of digits 2 to 4. It is also supplied by the deep branch of the radial nerve, and it extends the metacarpophalangeal joints and through the extensor. Expansion assists the lumbrical and interossei muscles to extend the proximal and distal interphalangeal joints. It also assists in extending the hand. The third superficial muscle of the posterior compartment of the forearm is the extensor digit minimi. It also originates from the common extensor tendon. The tendon passes under ER and divides into two slips that insert into the extensor expansion for the little finger. This muscle extends the metacarpophalangeal joint of the little finger and is supplied by the deep branch of the radial nerve. The fourth muscle is the extensor carpi ulnaris, which originates from the common extensor tendon. Its tendon passes under the extensor retinaculum and is inserted into the posterior surface of the base of the fifth metacarpal bone. Its action is that it adducts and extends the hand at the wrist joint. The last muscle is the anconeus. It is also considered to be part of the posterior compartment of the arm, but since it is situated just at the elbow joint, some anatomists also consider it to be part of the posterior compartment of the forearm. It originates from the lateral epicondyle of the humerus and is inserted into the olecranon process of the ulna. Supplied by the radial nerve, the action of the muscle is that it assists the triceps of the arm to extend the elbow joint. Those were the superficial muscles of the posterior compartment of the forearm. The trick to remembering these muscles is that remember these are all extensor muscles of the forearm. So if you just remember this sentence: baked chocolate chips, double dip cherries. The capitalized words denote the name of the muscles. The longer word, the longer muscle. You can pause and commit the names of the muscles before moving ahead. Just like how I showed you a trick to remember the attachments of superficial muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm, there is another trick to remember these muscles of the posterior compartment. It may be a little confusing at first, so follow my instructions closely to better understand. Hold your elbow with thumbs up and the other four fingers curling behind the lateral epicondyle, as shown in the picture here. Then go in a sequence of thumb, little finger, ring finger, middle finger, and index finger. The thumb is above and represents the origin point as the lateral condyle for brachioradialis and extensor carpi radialis longus. All other fingers represent the origin point at lateral epicondyle, little finger, extensor carpi radialis brevis and extensor digitorum, ring finger, extensor digitorum minime, middle finger, extensor carpi ulnaris, index finger, anconeus. That's all there is to know about the forearm's superficial muscles in the posterior compartment. Now let's look at the deep muscles of the posterior compartment. There are 5 deep muscles. We have the supinator, abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis, extensor pollicis longus, and extensor indicis. The supinator muscle originates from the lateral epicondyle of the humerus and ulna, and ligaments around the elbow joint. Its fibers are arranged in 2 planes, between which the deep branch of the radial nerve lies. The muscle fibers wind around and are inserted into the neck and shaft of the radius. It is supplied by the deep branch of the radial nerve. Just like its name, this muscle assists in the supination of the forearm at proximal and distal radioulnar joints. The next muscle is the abductor pollicis longus. This muscle originates from the middle of the posterior surface of the shaft of the ulna and radius and adjoining interosseous membrane. The tendon passes under the extensor retinaculum and is inserted into the posterior surface of the base of the first metacarpal bone. Supplied by the deep branch of the radial nerve, this muscle abducts and extends the thumb at the carpometacarpal joints. The third deep muscle of the posterior compartment of the forearm is the extensor pollicis brevis. It originates from the radius and adjoining interosseous membrane. The tendon of this muscle passes beneath the extensor retinaculum. It is inserted into the posterior surface of the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb. This muscle extends the metacarpophalangeal joint of the thumb and is innervated by the deep branch of the radial nerve. The fourth deep muscle of the posterior compartment of the forearm is the extensor pollicis longus. It originates from the ulna and adjoining interosseous membrane. The tendon of this muscle passes beneath the extensor retinaculum and uses the medial side of the dorsal tubercle of the radius as the pulley. It is inserted into the posterior surface of the base of the distal phalanx of the thumb. This muscle extends the distal phalanx of the thumb and is innervated by the deep branch of the radial nerve. The last muscle of the deep group is called the extensor indicis. This muscle originates from the posterior surface of the ulna and the adjacent part of the interosseous membrane. The tendon passes beneath the extensor retinaculum in company with the tendons of the extensor digitorum. It is inserted into the extensor expansion of the index finger. Supplied by the deep branch of the radial nerve, it extends the metacarpophalangeal joint of the index finger. This ends our discussion on the deep muscles of the posterior compartment. As you have seen, the muscles of the posterior compartment are supplied by the deep branch of the radial nerve, while those of the lateral compartment by the radial nerve. Our presentation on the compartments of the forearm has now come to a close. Please feel free to download the lectures PDF so you can easily study the information whenever you choose without having to take notes.
Explore our extensive library of over 1,800 video lectures to learn about a wide range of topics. Only on sqadia.com.